So I often see people making videos talking about the pros and cons of life in Japan. But interestingly enough, it always seems to be either tourists who stay for an extended amount of time, or people who actually come to live in the country but stay for a very short amount of time. Or on the other hand, just your typical English teacher, people who come here to do some form of glorified tourism while making some money on the side giving English lessons. Working, specifically with those companies that hire exclusively native speakers. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong about that. It's a nice way to make some little money on the side while you get to know the country. But in my opinion, there's a lot of very important and objective information that you just cannot get from that kind of experience. Now, I've been living in Tokyo, Japan for almost 7 years, running and managing my own business. A business that honestly has been doing fairly well over the last few years. And so today I would like to share with you what it's really like living and running your own business in Tokyo, Japan. Now, first of all, you very often hear people talk about discrimination and xenophobia in Japan and how I wasn't able to go into that restaurant or I wasn't able to rent that apartment and things like that. But I would like to tell you why I think that the reality is not as straightforward as that. Now, first of all, you have to keep in mind that up until this point in time, Japan actually has never had this amount of people from outside coming to live or visit the country as they do right now. And as I always say, because of their own isolation, because you have to remember that Japan actually had its own borders closed and isolated from the rest of the world for over 200 years, they were actually able to find their own path, their own way into the modern world, into the modern era. And it's a path that in many ways is very different from the rest of the world, and that's why we find so many things that we consider to be unique about Japan. So many unique services, so many unique products, and so many unique ways in which people interact with each other. They've perfectly designed all these systems and they've put all these systems in place to perfectly fit the needs of a Japanese citizen. But if you're coming to live in Japan, or even if you're just coming to visit, your needs are likely going to be very different. And so now, as of the last decade or the last couple of decades, they've had this huge influx of people from all over the world coming to live in the country or visit the country, and they themselves have also had to scramble to find ways to deal with all the many different needs of these many different people. And granted, they're not always able to do it in a way that you actually agree with, but can you really blame them? Japan has spent most, if not all of its modern history actually serving a very specific type of population. And so when all of a sudden people from all over the world start showing up and bringing their own expectations, whether it's about customer service, communication, or just general business practices, or even just general culture, it's not surprising that there's going to be some friction. On the one hand, that friction can show up in very small ways when you live here. Like, for example, I speak Japanese just fine, but from time to time, when my wife and I go out to a nice restaurant and I ask the server a question directly, it's not uncommon for the server to answer the question by looking at my wife instead of at me. And now, I know there's a very specific type of person that's going to really want to get offended by this, but I really don't think they're doing it out of maliciousness at all. On the other hand, I think they do it out of their own insecurities. You see, for them it's actually a lot more comfortable to deal with a local, a face that they're familiar with, rather than with a foreigner, particularly when they haven't been particularly prepared or trained to deal with this kind of people. You have to remember that Japanese people in general are very non-confrontational, and so they're always going to try to find the easiest way out of any interaction. At least that's my opinion, my experience, and I also try to understand that reaction with kindness. But like I've said before, I've also met many people who actually get very offended and very upset by this, and they just continue making the situation more and more awkward by asking them, "Why aren't you looking at me?" And this is just not the way to do it. But in any case, that friction that I was talking about earlier can also show up in slightly bigger ways when you're actually trying to build something here, build your own business in this country. Like, for example, when you come to Japan for the first time and you're trying to create a business for the first time and you have to, for example, open your own bank account for the first time, you will feel as if you actually have to prove your worth to them. Like, they will be actually deeming whether you're worthy of having a bank account with them or not. Now, of course, there are some ways around this, and you'll see that it's actually not the same around the world. You can, for example, go to Switzerland, go to Honduras, go to Dubai, and open a bank account the moment you get off the plane. But unfortunately, here in Japan, it doesn't exactly work like that. You see, starting a business in Japan does not necessarily feel like you're plugging into an already existing system, but rather that you're coming into a system that was made, well, just not for you. But that doesn't mean it's actually hostile in any way. Actually, on the contrary, I found it to be very kind. But it just means that just like when you come here, you have to learn a new language, you also have to learn a new way in which you interact with society. It just means it takes more time. And a lot of foreigners, of course, when they come here, they expect things to move quickly, just like they would, for example, in the States or back in Europe. Email someone, get a reply, set up a meeting, and then move on. But here in Japan, that pace is actually very rare, especially if you're new. Because people here actually want to see consistency. They don't want to see that you're just passing through. So, like I mentioned before, you can go to Switzerland, Honduras, Dubai, or many other places and actually set up your company, create your business the moment you set foot in the country. But in Japan, that's not always the case. If you're starting from the beginning, you have to be willing to build your reputation from zero, from nothing, and be determined enough to slowly climb your way upwards. In a sense, it's a lot like building a good line of credit. For example, you have to build good relationships with your credit card companies, you have to use your card and spend your money responsibly, and you have to correctly manage your credit card payments in order to give them some kind of an idea that you kind of know what you're doing with your money. And eventually, if you're good enough, then they'll offer you an upgrade, maybe they'll give you a better card or ask you to apply for a bigger account and so on. And here in Japan, it works in a similar way. You have to build good relationships with the people around you. You have to start getting your name out there without expecting that you're going to get the results immediately. Because like I said just earlier, they want to see consistency. They don't want to see that you're just another tourist or another expat who's just passing through. They want to see that you're actually someone who's coming here, integrating into the culture, into the business environment, and actually offering some kind of value to society. At least in my experience. Remember that many more people far smarter than I am have said the world belongs to those who are willing to do the work without expecting results. Meaning that if you want to create something big, whether it's here in Japan or actually anywhere else in the world, all you have to do is keep your head down and do what needs to be done. Japan tends to be a very conservative place. Japan is not like Dubai. So if you want to be this worldly entrepreneur and become a global superpower and carve your own path, your own way through the world at your own pace, Japan is not going to be the easiest place for that. It can be done, it has been done before, but it's going to take more work on your part. And there are many other places around the world where you can do just that in a much easier way with less obstacles in the way. But likely, if you're thinking about coming to Japan and create your own business in this country, it's because you actually like the country, you enjoy the culture, and you appreciate the quality of life that Japan can offer you. But be aware that, like I said before, it's not the easier choice, because if you're coming to Japan, particularly to delve into the entrepreneurial world, you're going to have a few more obstacles in your way. So it's generally a choice that's reserved only for those who really want it. Now, I've talked about many of those obstacles in this video right here, so if you're interested, you can go watch it right after you finish this one. So in my opinion, the biggest challenge is not that they might be discriminating against you, but rather that you have not yet earned the privilege of being taken seriously, at least not right away. Now, I'm not saying these things are not real. Discrimination can be very real in many ways, but I have met a non-zero number of people who just end up using it as a justification. Oh, it's because of how tall I am, because they hate the color of my skin, because they hate people from my country, because I'm too short, because I sound weird. And in my opinion, in most cases, this is just a cheap excuse to justify not doing the work. Because you just don't want to accept that as a non-local, you're likely going to have to work twice as hard, 3 times, 5 times as hard as a local to likely get a similar result. But so what? At the end, you're just going to decide to not do it and then blame them for it. But on the other hand, I'd much rather take responsibility and at least claim that I did the work that needed to be done. You have to earn that over time. That trust and that respect takes time and it takes work. It's a privilege, it's not a right, and you're not entitled to have it. You have to work for it. So the main thing is that coming to Japan and creating your own business in Japan is not easy by any means, but those who do it actually do it because they want to be here. So they're able and willing to make the sacrifices. Once again, because they enjoy the culture, they like the country, and they're able to appreciate the quality of life that Japan can actually offer. Because Japan can be an amazing country, and I've met many acquaintances who've actually had very lucrative businesses in this country. But the success of your business is going to depend on more than how tall you are or how short you are or how weird you sound, on whether you're actually willing to do the work, build your reputation, and back it up with your actions. And you're going to have to earn that slowly over time through small interactions with the people around you, showing up on time, doing what you said you were going to do, and actually standing up to the standards that you set for your business and for yourself. And even then, it's likely going to be slower than you'd want it to be. But here's the thing. Once you're in for good, and the people are going to stick with you. Because here in Japan, the relationships are solid and the support is very strong, and you'll find that Japanese customers are some of the most loyal customers that you could ever want. So, is succeeding in Japan actually hard? Yes, it is, but it's not impossible. Is it frustrating? Sure, often, any day. But is it worth it? Well, I guess you'll have to watch this video right here to find out. See you next time.